and welcome to Full Circle. I'm Emily Wilmson, and we're here today to talk about the Climate Action Plan. I have two guests with me. I have John Phelan, who is Energy Services Manager for Fort Collins Utilities. Welcome, John.
Good morning, Emily. Happy to be here.
Great. And I have Lucinda Smith, who's Director of Environmental Services. Welcome, Lucinda.
Thanks, Emily.
So this is a while back now. On March 3rd, City Council passed a resolution about the Climate Action Plan. What did they do? What does that action mean?
Well, in the resolution that they passed, they adopted new greenhouse gas goals for the Fort Collins community. And so in doing so, they actually reaffirmed a goal that we already had for the year 2020. And that was to reduce community-wide emissions 20% below 2005, which is our baseline year, by 2020. But they also set some very ambitious new goals for the community, which is to also reduce community emissions 80% below 2005 by 2030. And striving to be carbon neutral by 2050.
Okay, great. And so they approved a climate action plan framework, which means what? What is the...
Right. Well, the underlying document that provided information about how we would make progress on these goals is called the Climate Action Plan Framework. And that's not something that they formally adopted via the resolution, but it's really an important part of their consideration of the goals. And the development of this framework plan was a process that took over 9 months and involved a citizen advisory committee and public input. So it was really a very important piece of identifying how we would be able to make progress towards these goals.
I think one of the key things to maybe remember for the public to remember is this represents an acceleration of our goals. So we previously had goals of that scale out at 2050 and brought them forward by 20 years. And that really represents sort of the ambitious and aspirational nature of the goals.
So the previous goals, let's just state them out loud, 20% by 2020.
Which is the same as we have now.
Right.
And then 80% by 2050. So we moved that forward to 80% by 2030 and added the carbon neutrality component by 2050.
Okay, so now what? Now council's approved these lofty goals. We're going to get there. How do we do it?
Well, there are a number of things that we're going to be working on. First is continuing and expanding existing programs that work, and there are many programs, plans, and policies in the city that support progress there. So many transportation programs, the recently adopted bicycle master plan, work towards the energy policy. So we'll certainly be looking at and expanding those, but in addition, there's several strategies in the Climate Action Plan framework that are new. And so this year in 2015 and into 2016, we'll be doing more outreach with the public and working on implementation details and also prioritizing which new things we want to bring forward.
I'd say also there's some additional research, and not really research and development, but understanding of the implications of some of the strategies, for example, on our electric utility system, and what are the design criteria and changes we may need to make over this time horizon. Make sure that the system continues to work well for everyone, and at the same time can bring in, for example, a lot more renewable energy onto the system.
Okay, so looking at more in depth whether our current system can handle putting on solar, additional wind, additional...
Exactly, and within, right now we have pretty rapid adoption of solar. A lot of customers are very interested in that, and our system is handling that just fine. But the implications of going to the levels that are implied by these new goals are much higher, and so we need to make sure and do the proper planning that we can accommodate those additional resources.
So tell us a little bit about the energy policy that Fort Collins Utilities has adopted or is working on.
The city's had energy policy, formal energy policy since 2003, and it goes through a sort of regular review period of approximately every 5 years. This time around, we were kind of waiting a little bit to make sure that we would stay in sync with Council's interests for climate goals. because the energy policy references those. And then I think of it as kind of the next level of detail underneath the climate action plan goals. So it'll have a little bit more specificity on targets for efficiency, for renewable energy, for local renewable energy. At the same time, it also addresses use of natural gas in buildings and in industry, as well as transportation fuels. So we're trying to make sure that it is aligned with the variety of policies and plans the city has, whether that's even extending to city plan and the transportation master plan, and kind of keep everything swimming in the same direction.
Okay. So Lucinda, maybe that's a good time to talk about what are the different areas of implementation in the climate action plan framework.
Right.
So this is one piece, right? But what are the...
Right. There are 4 major chapters in the framework plan, and one has to do with buildings. The next area has to do with transportation, then energy supply and delivery, and then 4th, road to zero waste. And there's some other strategies in the climate action plan framework, but those are the 4 major building blocks. And so as John was mentioning earlier, we want the climate action plan framework to be aligned with existing plans and programs. And another one that we haven't talked about yet is the road to zero waste. So those were goals that Council adopted in 2013, and we have a road to zero waste plan. So we expect that there are going to be some actions coming forward for the citizens and City Council to consider this year in 2015, looking at a universal recycling ordinance, which would consider bringing recycling along with trash service to multifamily and businesses, as we have it now for the residential sector.
Okay, where it's required, in other words, or it's part of the...
Yeah, where the costs are bundled together.
Okay, gotcha. So these different areas, so the climate action plan is kind of the overall framework for the city, and then within these categories we have different policies kind of moving forward. Like you said, the bike master plan is one, and energy policy is one, and green building, that's coming along as well?
Sure. Yep. We certainly have many programs underway in green building, and one of the things that's happening this year is an update to the building codes. But as John was mentioning, the Climate Action Plan framework kind of sketches out and identifies some high-level targets where we would like to be by the year 2030 in each of these sectors. And then I think that will be looked at and considered for the energy policy update. So just as one example, in the transportation sector, the efforts there involve both efforts to reduce the amount of driving and then also efforts to have the vehicles that we do drive be cleaner. And so by 2030, an objective is to have 50%, one of every 2 new vehicles purchased be an electric vehicle. There's a long way to go. Fort Collins in the North Front Range is ahead of the national average in terms of electric vehicle uptake, but we still have a long way to go. And fortunately, there are other programs in place, like Drive Electric Northern Colorado, that are working towards some of these objectives too.
Okay, great. So how do we get at the public sentiment about some of these programs as we go forward? How are we going to engage the public?
I think there was, Lucinda maybe could better describe the public outreach leading up to the council action earlier this month. But I think really through activities in their own homes and family life and business that align with the climate action plan goals are probably the best way. So one example currently is our participation in the Georgetown University Energy Prize, which in Fort Collins is called the LUSAWA campaign, and we have the opportunity to compete with other communities around the nation for a $5 million prize. But in that element, it becomes a very tangible set of actions that people can take that benefit themselves in terms of managing their own utility costs and energy and environmental footprint. At the same time, an opportunity to compete in a prize competition with the potential for $5 million, and really building awareness of some of the activities around the climate action plan without necessarily even calling it that. So.
Right. I'm really excited about our participation in the LUSAWA campaign, because to me it seems like the perfect kind of launch point. It very much supports the Climate Action Plan, but it's very tangible and relatively short term. It's a 2-year competition, and as John was saying, if citizens and businesses do participate, especially in the residential sector, there are lots of opportunities that can come through energy efficiency measures and the opportunity to win this $5 million prize that we could then apply to more efficiency measures, and the community has the opportunity to decide how that would be used.
So basically turning off your electronics, turning down your AC, making those kinds of immediate improvements, in other words, for the LUSAWA campaign, those are the kinds of tangible things you're talking about.
Well, I think there's a suite of options that start with those really simple things. You know, every switch in your house, be it a light switch or your thermostat or your hot water heater temperature, those are all simple actions you can take that don't cost anything and can start to save you money right away. And the next steps might be to start to, replacing more light bulbs with LEDs or light-emitting diodes, and they're, great prices and selection now at the local retail stores and things like that. And then at the higher end of the scale are things like, getting an energy audit and really looking at the fundamentals in your house or your building, be that insulation or Energy Star appliances, things like that. So in every sort of piece, there's the simple things to do, the intermediate and the advanced, so to speak. So,
When I sensed some excitement in the community about this prize, I had someone call me wanting to report that she had done a home energy audit and whether we needed to count that toward winning the prize. So it sounds like people are getting excited and doing things. So what are some other talk a little bit about the public engagement leading up to council's approval. What are some other things that you did, Lucinda?
Sure. We had 3 public open houses where the public could come and learn about the Climate Action Plan draft strategies. We also met with many stakeholder groups in the community, and we also met multiple times with a number of city council advisory boards. And we had a website that had an opportunity for citizens to provide comment. And that is still up, and we're slowly still getting additional comment. People who are interested in learning more about what's next, or just sharing their interest or questions. So we did a fairly extensive public outreach and brought that information to City Council when they considered the resolution on March 3rd. But it's still true that we'll need to do more community engagement as we work on developing some of the implementation details for these strategies. Because I think that community engagement and then also identifying ways to finance some of these bigger strategies that ultimately will bring them to scale, those are 2 really important elements in long term how we're going to make progress on these community greenhouse gas goals.
So do you see us doing something within the next 6 months to get out to the public? And I mean, what's a general timeline?
Yes, I would say this year in 2015 we will be going back out to the public, and we don't have those details worked out yet. We'll be meeting with the staff team and kind of developing the next steps on how we come up with an implementation plan or plans for these strategies. But I think the community definitely can be looking at for more opportunities for input and discussion and deeper engagement, because many of the new strategies need the implementation details developed, and so that's where engaging with stakeholder groups is really important.
Okay, great. Anything to add to that?
Well, one that we haven't talked about is our relationship with Platte River Power Authority and the other member cities of that, and I think that's going to be also an ongoing component of the process. Platte River's been adding some great and substantial renewable energy resources on their system, and also is embarking on a set of kind of long-term resource planning initiatives. And so our role with that organization is going to be very important over time as well.
So you might explain, just for folks who don't know, Platte River Power Authority is our power provider.
They are our generation power electricity provider, and we are one of 4 member communities that own Platte River Power Authority. So we're a member and an owner at the same time with the other communities of Loveland, Longmont, and Estes Park. So together we can be planning the sort of the long-term future electricity resources, which will be an important part of reaching the goals that Council laid out earlier this month.
Okay, and Platte River is also doing some strategic planning along the way. I mean, they're doing a separate process, or?
They're doing a process partly at the direction of their board of strategic planning, and then in the next couple of years they also have some requirements, federal requirements around filing resource plans, and just kind of lining those up that look out at fairly long intervals all the way out to around 2050.
Okay, so this might be a complicated question, but so that should set alarm bells off for you. But so with the 4 communities owning Platte River Power Authority, how do we move forward with our very aggressive goals if they're more aggressive than the other communities? How does that work?
I think that's something that's really it is a difficult and complex question to be working with those other communities and understanding what their goals are and values and what ours are. And there's quite a bit of overlap, but they're certainly not exactly aligned, and understanding the steps that we can take over time. So I don't think that road is completely clear, but it'll be a very important component of the plan and reaching these goals. So.
Okay, good to know. So what are we doing about climate action now? What are some of the things that you mentioned some of these new plans that are coming forward, but we're doing a lot in this community already. What are some of those? Can you highlight some of those?
Sure.
programs?
Well, one example is waste diversion. And so although the waste stream is a relatively small part of our community carbon footprint, we are really making a lot of progress on diverting community waste through efforts like the WRAP, which is a Business Recycling and Waste Reduction Assistance Program, and through education and outreach, and also through the Pay-As-You-Throw ordinance. And so we anticipate by June of 2015, if not sooner, being able to come out with the last year's 2014 climate status report, and that will show the progress that we're able to make in various areas, and we're continuing to make progress on our community waste diversion. So that's really exciting, and that's an important part of climate action planning. And there's many programs that are currently in place that are making great progress under the energy policy as well.
Yeah, certainly we have a broad suite of efficiency and conservation programs for businesses and residents to take advantage of, whether that's typically starting with an assessment or audit type process, but that can lead to the ability to take advantage of rebates. We have some wonderful terms now for our home efficiency loan program that should make that very attractive and make it easier for customers to be able to do the insulation and air sealing and windows and furnaces and those sort of basic infrastructure pieces of their houses at no out-of-pocket cost. So they're able to finance that directly on their utility bill with some very favorable rates right now.
And so that's something we already have. We already have a great energy conservation kind of mindset in this community. We save 1.5% a year or something like that in terms of energy.
Good segue with regards to the energy policy. So our current goal is to have our portfolio save the equivalent of 1.5% of our community's electricity use on an annual basis. So that would be 15% over 10 years. And we've been hitting that target the last several years, and we're doing the reporting now for 2014. And it looks that we'll be above that goal again, and really reflects the commitment of utilities in the city to provide the tools and resources, as well as the interest of our community in taking advantage of those. So
that's great.
And in addition to the efficiency programs, you might have mentioned it earlier, John, there's some really great renewable solar rebates. And so, among other things, I think the community solar garden just had a groundbreaking earlier.
We had the groundbreaking last week. Ceremonial shovels in the ground and tossing of dirt, but citizens ought to start seeing a lot of construction activity out there starting in the next 2 to 4 weeks, and within about 3 or 4 months we'll have about a 600 kilowatt community solar garden out on Riverside Avenue, and that'll be an exciting next step on solar. And This year, we'll probably see our solar resources at least double from where they were last year between that project, individual home and business projects, as well as some larger scale ones that are going in towns.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Any closing thoughts about the Climate Action Plan as we wrap up our time here?
Well, I think just to say that by the action City Council took to set these, to accelerate our goal for 2030 and set a carbon neutral goal for 2050, it really does make a leadership statement for Fort Collins that we hope will really bring additional opportunities to our community for innovation, maybe attracting outside capital. And so we'll be working on implementation details to very much get the input of the community, but I really think that we have additional opportunities through this goal-setting action that they took, and I'm very excited about it.
Great.
And I would say just yesterday my son was telling me, he's a senior at Poudre High School, that his friends were starting to share the action of the Council on Climate Action Plan and the aggressive goals on their Facebook pages, and really being excited about that, and I think that's pretty remarkable. We can engage that our youth and future leaders to be excited about this kind of thing.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Lucinda, and we'll see you next time on Full Circle.